I'm going to start the meeting. Thank you everybody again for your attendance today, and I hope, and I genuinely do mean this, I hope you are and you and your family are keeping well. Can I ask you again, your mute button, if you're not muted at the moment, please do that. I hear some activity going on behind somewhere, if you can do that. I want to say, as been said at a number of committees, a special thank you to all our staff for during this difficult period. We've all worked very, very hard, as we have as well, councillors, and you know that. We've worked hard, and that's important. But when we talk about all the staff, our committee has got quite a wide remit, a range of services, and they go from finance to legal, property, procurement and HR. So it covers a whole wide spectrum. So a thank you to all the staff. I've just said there about the mute button. If during the meeting your mute button is not unmuted the way it should be, Andrew and I will say to you, because it's important for that. The other thing is, you know by now about using the chat bar. I can't see everybody. There's going to be over 40 people in this committee today with councillors and officers. So I can't see you all. So I depend on the chat bar, and Andrew and I will keep an eye on that. Now, on that now, we are now going straight into the agenda. Agenda item 1. Is there any declarations of interest?
Convener.
Yep. Who's speaking?
Tommy Morgan here.
Tommy? Yep.
Well, declare an interest in the Revenue Monitoring Report 8B. It contains reference to Culture NL. My wife's a part-time employee. Thank you.
Okay. I noticed Councillor O'Rourke made a declaration, and I know that Councillor McNeill, I don't know if Councillor McNeill's on the line yet. They had some difficulty trying to get in earlier. He's making a declaration on the North Lanarkshire properties, but he'll do that as and when he comes in himself with that. Any other declarations?
I'll just need Councillor O'Rourke just to outline the nature of his declaration, if you don't mind, please, Convener.
Okay.
Bob, I'm employed by NLL, just to in case there was any issues with it.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Are we all right? Okay, item...
Sorry, Convener, Councillor O'Rourke, if I could just have his declaration just for the minute.
Councillor O'Rourke?
Hi,
Councillor O'Rourke, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, son. I can hear you now.
I was having problems unmuting.
You're making a declaration?
Yes, it's on agenda item 11 as a Director of North Lanarkshire Properties.
Okay, thank you for that. We're moving on now.
Sorry, Councillor Burgess, could I also follow, basically I'm on NLL as well. Could I just make that clear? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to agenda item 2. It's here for the Joint Consultative Committee. It's here for noting. Are you happy to note that item? Yes, I'm taking it from now, members, as I said, if silence is golden, unless otherwise you'll state, and I'll take it at that through the rest of the meeting, if you're okay with that. Item 3 is sorry, just giving me, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. Agenda item 3 is Freedom of Information paper. Archie?
Thanks, Convener, and good morning, members. This is the annual report on performance in relation to freedom of information requests and requests under the Environmental Information Regulations. I'm not intending to take members through the report in detail. It's quite stats focused, and the 3 appendices set out in summary the position for the last financial year. However, what I would say is that we continue to demonstrate very high percentage of performance. You'll see the measures of success from the Information Commissioner's Office are set out at the end of the report. and breaking it down over the 4 quarters of the last year, we have exceeded those performance thresholds, save for the last quarter when we did have some difficulties with staff working from home and accessing information. But overall, the annual figure of 97% is still within the excellent category. I'm happy, Convener, to take any questions on, in particular, what's summarised in the appendices.
Thank you, Archie, for that. I'm looking at the chat bar, and there is no questions coming in on agenda item 3. Can we accept the recommendations on page 9? Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 4, moving on. There's the first of a number of finance related agenda items, and it's the financial regulations and scheme of financial delegation. Elaine?
Thank you, Convener. The financial regulations and scheme of delegation are key elements of the Council's financial strategy, and this report gives an update on changes that have been made as a result of the latest annual review. The main changes to the regulations are shown in Appendix 1, which highlights the change and gives the reason for it. The updated financial regulations also are attached in full so that members can cross-reference and see the context that applies to each of the changes. And where there's amendments, those sections have been shaded for your information. There are a number of revisions that reflect the approval of the financial strategy last year, which highlight where other policies that make up the overall strategy need to be read in conjunction with these regulations. For example, the revenue resources budget strategy, the use of the reserves policy, and treasury management strategy. Some important changes were made to section 12, which deals with creditors' payments. The highlighted changes that have been made have been applied following a move to home working, and the revisions were developed in conjunction with internal audit to ensure that creditors could be paid and at the same time controls maintained even where normal processes could not be followed. There's also a minor amendment as to how invoices are approved in response to a recommendation in a recent audit report. There are no significant changes made to the scheme of financial delegation.
Thank you, Elaine, for that. I know in the chat bar there are no questions on agenda item 4. Can you agree the recommendations on page 17? Yes, thank you for that. Moving on to item 5 is the Loans Funds Advance Repayment Policy, pages 59 to 64. Elaine?
This is a really important report that advises committee about, firstly, a change in legislation that goes back to 2016, which allowed local authorities to vary how they account for loans fund payments and ensure that they're fully accounted for over the life of the asset. So that means, in effect, that we're able to spread accounting for loans over a longer period than was previously the case. However, at the time of the legislation, when it was brought forward, it could only be applied to future payments going forward. However, in May last year, an argument developed that it would be prudent to take this approach a step further and to consider that in spreading over a longer period of time, it could be argued that local authority had effectively over-provided in previous years. And after a period of debate, this position was ultimately accepted by Audit Scotland. In the budget process last year, budget setting, a 4 million loans fund saving was taken, and the budget report advised at that time this was a result of this change in accounting practice. And we also said that a further review would be carried out during 2021 to investigate any further opportunities. And we said then that any benefit realised would be identified to members and a proposal developed to use this to assist in supporting future budgets. So basically the 4 million saving last year looked at what saving could be made going forward by extending the period over which loans were accounted for. The work that's been ongoing over the last year and the result of that is set out in this report is based on the principle that had the accounting for the loans been extended at the outset, then we have made an over provision in previous years and can take a credit now as a result. The important points to highlight are in section 2, 3, 10 and 11, which show that by adopting this new methodology and profiling charges differently, we can achieve a budget saving next year. But it needs to be recognised that this will result in costs in future years. It is not a cash saving. It's about reprofiling, but it lets us take 10 million as a recurring benefit next year and pay it back over an extended period of up to 45 years, with the spread of that repayment being managed to ensure it's prudent and affordable and it aligns to our medium and longer term plans. I'm asking committee to note the approach that will be taken, and the actual figure will be confirmed, but it's expected to be in the region of £10 million saving to the general fund, which will make a considerable contribution to closing the budget gap in 21-22. And there will also be a saving to the HRA, which we're working through at the moment. Most, if not all, local authorities are taking advantage of this change in policy to some extent, and some have already done it. The approach has been fully discussed and agreed with Audit Scotland in terms of the accounting treatment that will be applied to our annual accounts next year. And finally, it's important to note that this work is completely separate to the fiscal flexibility options that have been put forward by Scottish Government to help manage the cost of COVID. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Elaine. I don't have any questions on the chat bar. And can I say, oh, sorry, they're coming in now. Okay, just first of all, can I just say, Ian, Neil, we've got your note about your connection and about your declaration. I've got three speakers, two I think. Councillor Beveridge has come in twice, so it's Councillor Beveridge and then Councillor Morgan.
Thanks, Convener. It's just back to 2.23. See, it's moved from 7% interest in 2008 to 3. This is now going to go to 3.45% interest. Is it likely that that may well go up again in the future, Elaine? Thanks.
This section highlights the fact that we're now going to be applying an average rate going forward, and these are the rates that applied in the past. So it shouldn't be hugely impacted by future interest rate changes as we move forward. It's all about developing the model based on previous experience.
Thank you, Elaine. Councillor Morgan.
Thanks, Convener. I know this must be a specialist area in local government finance. That's the reason why we availed ourselves of Link Asset Services to look into this. And it's excellent in the sense that it gives us some flexibility, or it's an additional weapon of fiscal flexibility that is positive rather than a negative attack on local government finance. But can Elaine clarify a couple of points? I would say, Elaine, could you tell the specialists that they see the world through a different prism of elected members? Elected members deal with housing, and some of the most economic valuable assets we've got are over 100 years. They're called council houses. Some of the best council houses we've got in North Lanarkshire are the interwar houses. So a useful economic life does not necessarily mean it runs out after 30 or 45 years. But that's just a passing reference to the differences in the way things are evaluated. But it's interesting to see the cut-off point here was mentioned 2016. And what came to mind was they often use ball to kick on PFI and PPP projects that have been funded since the more or less the inception of the Scottish Parliament, Scottish Executive. Are those examples, or is there a time restricted that an exercise could be done by ourselves, and no bother with other local authorities, to go back and look at some of the projects that we funded through that? It was a bitter pill to swallow at the time, but to use the often quoted phrase that was there at the time, it was the only game in town, and we had to take it if the crumbling estate had to be addressed. Is it possible we could look at some of the workings of some of these projects, i.e. new schools, but specifically new schools? Because I noticed that in my own ward area, we're halfway through paying back a school up there. The first one that opened, Glengown St Mary's. Another 15 years and it will come back to us. It may well be within the council's best interest to look at these, to rework if it's possible, because coming back in 15 years, we'll have to take it, whatever condition it's in. It will be a 30-year building, and from the original calculations that was done, I think we'll get that back in another 15 years. And that's just one localised example. Is that something we could look at that could be added to the positive aspects of this report and look at various projects that could be reworked over a 45-year project, a 45-year payback plan, rather than the 30 years we've got at present?
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Elaine?
Well, looking at restructuring our PPP contracts is something that's been discussed many times over the years, and we still believe that as one of the later councils to join the scheme, we had a reasonable deal and there were no real opportunities to reschedule that. But interestingly enough, one of the fiscal flexibilities that have been put forward by Scottish Government to manage the cost of COVID is exactly look at, as Councillor Morgan suggests, it's looking at extending the payment periods. And just to be clear, this isn't payments to our contractors, that won't change. It's all about how we account for the payments. But the flexibilities with Scottish Government are still under consideration. We've got a long way to go before we've got absolute clarity on how they will be applied. But they are very similar, along very similar lines to the report that I've just outlined, and would allow councils to extend the period over which they account for the PI and PPP deals.
That's interesting, Convener. I appreciate that response. I appreciate you allowing me to ask it, because it certainly be of interest to all of us, regardless of our political colours. And I'm assuming it's across the public sector, so hospitals would fall under the same potentiality of having a longer payback period. Am I right in saying that, Elaine? Albeit that the reason I'm asking about hospitals is because that would impact on IJB. It's all intertwined when it comes to public sector finance.
No, that's not under discussion at the moment. It's something very specific to local government, which would allow us to manage the cost of COVID. But it's also really important to mention that statutory guidance as it currently exists means that we can't do this. And we can't take the approach that you've suggested, Councillor Morgan. It would take a change in legislation, and that's what Scottish Government are looking at now. But as far as I'm aware, it only will apply to local government.
Right, thanks for that, Elaine. It brings you up to date. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks, Elaine. Councillor Beveridge, I think you came in twice. Was that a mistake? Yeah, okay. Councillor Goldie?
Thanks, Convener. Just really a comment. I think certainly that hospital PFI PP deals were structured differently, because I know certainly working within the NHS at the time there was some concern over who would actually own the hospitals at the end of the time. So there is differences.
Thanks for that clarity, Councillor Goldie. I do not see any other questions for agenda item 5. The recommendations are on page 59. Are you happy to accept those recommendations? Yes, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 6, again, it's Elaine. It's a review of the budget savings for 2021 up to 2023. Elaine?
This report related to the programme of work item around developing the budget strategy. We committed to bringing forward a mid-year update on the achievement of savings, and this report provides that update. The savings targets to support the overall budgeted position for 2021 was 31.213 million, and we expect 87% of this to be fully achieved, with the remainder in place for the beginning of the next financial year. The details of the savings that won't be achieved are given in Appendix 2, and the reason for non-achievement is generally in relation to delays in implementation, often down to COVID. It's expected that all of these will be in place at the beginning of the new financial year. Where savings are not achieved, it is down to timing issues, so therefore this report gives no concern on a recurring basis. For completeness, the report also gives an update on savings for 1920 that weren't fully achieved in that year. It was previously reported that in that year, services achieved total savings of 24.9 million against an approved target of 27.7. So that was 90% of savings achieved in 1920, with the shortfall achieved through alternative savings and management action within that year. A further review of 1920 savings has confirmed that a further 1.8 million have now been fully implemented within 2021 budgets, with a balance of 965,000 to be managed within 2021, and that's shown in Appendix 3. Although it's really important to highlight, I would suggest that although this report focuses on the small proportion of savings that haven't been achieved in year, it should be viewed as a positive report, because it highlights that despite having set a very challenging budget in 2021, services are largely on track to deliver approved savings. And the Council is then maintaining its good track record in delivering savings despite the challenges that we're currently facing.
Thank you, Elaine. Sorry, I couldn't unmute me there, so we're okay. Thank you, Elaine, for that. There's no questions put on the chat bar for agenda item 6. So on pages 65, can you agree the recommendations? Yes, thank you. Agenda item 7 is the payment of local taxation and benefit update. Again, it's Elaine.
This report shows that at the 31st of October, income levels were down for both council tax and NDR. Firstly, council tax is down around 1.3% and NDR 3.2%, and both are a direct consequence of COVID. Recovery of council tax debt, as you know, was stood down during lockdown, but it's now been reinstated. And as I reported at the last committee, soft reminders were issued that focused on encouraging people in arrears to get in touch, first of all, to discuss their options, and it largely resulted in us signposting them to where they might be entitled to other benefits, or alternatively to arrange payment plans to clear the arrears. That process was largely successful, and we've seen an increase in income following that action. Formal processes for council tax recovery were then reinstated in August, with the statutory reminders going out towards the end of August. Council tax reductions claims have levelled out after a sharp increase that I highlighted in my last report, and Scottish Government have provided additional funding to councils to manage the increase in payments as a result of the increasing numbers of people who are now eligible. On NDR, the key point to note is that income collection is down. We are currently in the process of issuing soft reminders, and this should be complete by the end of November. And we're taking the same approach as we did for council tax, with the focus on assisting businesses and obviously recognition of the current challenges that businesses are facing. Moving on to business grants. I previously reported that council had paid out 42.3 million to almost 4,000 eligible businesses over the summer period on the schemes that closed subsequently on the 10th of July. More recently, in response to the local system of levels of restrictions, Scottish Government has introduced additional schemes to assist local businesses with grants of 2,000 or 3,000, depending on rateable value, for businesses that are required by law to close, and these will be payable every 4 weeks for the duration that the measures are in place. There's also a grant of 1,400 or 2,100, again depending on rateable value, for some businesses that remain open but are otherwise affected by the restrictions. These schemes opened to applications on the 13th of November, and we are currently working through these applications. At the time of writing this report, or since writing this report, further schemes have been announced. There's a 30 million discretionary funds, 15 million fund for self-employed, and 15 million for welfare to assist those communities that have been affected by level 4 restrictions, of which we are obviously one. As yet, we've had no guidance from Scottish Government on how these schemes will apply, or individual council allocations. We're waiting for these announcements. Moving on to the Scottish Welfare Fund, I previously reported additional funding provided by Scottish Government has allowed the priority level in the fund to be reduced from high to medium, which means that we can now support more claims. And the main point to note in this section is that as at the 31st of October, grants paid from Scottish Welfare Fund amounted to 26.5% of the annual award budget. That's relatively low given where we are at this point in the year, but there are a number of reasons for this. The belief is that other supports provided might have reduced the need for crisis, and I mean by that I mean free school meal vouchers, support to those shielding, etc. We've also experienced a lower demand on community care grants as people weren't moving over the lockdown period. It was expected that spend on the fund would increase sharply after the end of October when furlough ended. But now that this has been extended, demand might be less in the second part of the year than otherwise might have been expected. But we'll continue to spend through the welfare fund and look to adjust the priority level again to ensure that the maximum number of claims can be supported. The Scottish Welfare Fund is also administering the £500 hardship grants for those on low incomes and on qualifying benefits that are required to isolate and that suffer income loss as a result. And additional staff have been brought into the team to help with this additional demand, which is significant. Finally, on discretionary housing payments, the report highlights the total spend in relation to bedroom tax of 4.8 million, which is fully funded by Scottish Government. On the core funding, at the end of October, we had awarded 366,000 from 898,000 allocated. Again, the extension of the furlough scheme has reduced the demand on DHP in the same way as it has in respect of council tax reduction scheme and the welfare fund. And given this, we have approached Scottish Government to request that any underspend on discretionary housing payments can be carried forward into 21-22, given that the furlough scheme is now expected to end in March. Again, happy to take questions on that report.
Thank you, Elaine. I've got two councillors, Councillor McPake and Councillor in London. Councillor McPake first.
Thanks, Convener. Elaine, you mentioned within there the discretionary new money basically was coming from Scottish Government, 30 million. Now, I'll make a declaration of interest or otherwise here. I have not and will not claim any of that as being a self-employed taxi driver, but I've been inundated by calls from other self-employed people, namely taxi drivers, to say, where's this money? Now, it was announced a fortnight ago, and people are now saying, well, the council must have the money. I'm saying, well, it doesn't work like that. Can you give us any light into when this new money was announced a fortnight ago is likely to come to the council and when these people are likely to be able to claim that money? Thank you.
Unfortunately, Councillor, the 30 million has yet to be clarified as exactly how councils are going to be allowed to apply it. And over and above that, the method of distribution has yet to be agreed with Scottish Government. So we don't really have much indication at this point in time how much we'll get or how it can be used. But these discussions are ongoing.
Chair, if I can get just a small supplementary, would it be possible then to get something out on the council website to say this? Because people are saying, oh, this announcement was made,
So therefore, that money must be there if that announcement is made. I know, you know, we all know the way these things work, but it's a wee bit unfortunate for people who are genuinely waiting on this money. So I would ask if we can do something along those lines to keep people up to date, please. Thank you.
Councillor McPake, what we'll do after the meeting, Elaine and I will have a discussion about corporate communications with that to see what we can do about that. Councillor London.
Thanks, Chair. Comments and questions. I mean, just on the back of the question, hopefully, in agreeing that corporate communications approach, it'll be not only the delay or the engagement with Scottish Government will be highlighted, but presumably the full gambit of resource that's been made available will be articulated as well, just for balance. Elaine, in terms of questions, Section 2.5 of the report, 2.5.6 outlines the additional funding from Scottish Government on Scottish Welfare Fund, allowing for the fund award priority to be reduced from medium from high. I just wondered if you held data within the service that articulated the number of awards made to those within the medium category and those within the high category, to see how that additional resource has benefited those you know, who are in that lower category in terms of priority. And then just very finally, Chair, and I'm sure it's a comment that would be echoed across party, is Section 2.6.2 of the report, where it outlines that as at the 30th of September, the total paid in respect of bedroom tax is £4.64 million. And I just think that if the bedroom tax didn't exist and we didn't have to mitigate the bedroom tax, how that £4.64 million could have been better utilised, you know, on local services or otherwise. And it's a shame that that's the figure that we're sitting at. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor London. Before Elaine makes a response to your question, I think we can all agree with what you're saying about 262 about the bedroom tax, especially when you get it into £4.5 million. There's no disagreement with any councillors sitting here today with that. I don't think so anyway. Elaine, there was a specific question from Councillor London.
Yep, there's no doubt that reducing the priority of the fund will have allowed us to help a significant additional number of claimants, but I don't have that information to hand. I'll commit to providing that after the meeting, if that's acceptable.
That is acceptable. If you've not got it to hand, that's how we work. Councillor Goldie.
Thanks, Convener. Point that Councillor McPake put there, had a number of taxi drivers contact me, and their concern is I know we don't have the money or what, we've still got mechanisms put in place. So what I'm really asking is for a plea that we're able to look at the individual taxi drivers rather than taxi companies, because some of these guys are struggling financially and feel that if the cash goes to the companies, it may be a further delay or it may actually affect some of the payments to them. So it's just if we have some discretion on the distribution of the money, if and when it comes, is that we look for individual taxi drivers if possible.
I think before Elaine answers that, I would imagine that we need to clarify what the guidance is on that as well. And if there is flexibility in there, hopefully something can be done. Elaine, any comment on that?
No, absolutely. We do have to wait until the guidance before we could make
The other thing, I need to say, Elaine, you're breaking up with your sound. I caught the end of it there, but for anything future, just maybe check your connections with that. Just to say about that 30 million, although there's been no guidance, actually there's not been any amount, there's no information about how much we would get in actual fact. So that part's still to be come out as well. Councillor McManus, I've got you down here twice. I take it you've maybe hit the button by mistake the second time. Is that okay, Councillor McManus? You're on mute. You're still on mute, Councillor McManus. Yep, that's good.
That's us. It was just to ask why the council decided not to reduce the small and independent business rents, unlike some other councils in the area.
Elaine, can you answer that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Councillor McManus. Could you repeat that for me, please?
Yeah, it was just to ask why the council decided not to reduce the council rents on small and independent businesses, in the area, but yet other councils in Scotland did?
I'm not aware of what every other council has done, Councillor McManus, and I can't answer that question as to why they've taken certain decisions that we possibly haven't at that point in time.
Well, what maybe we can do if that is the case, Councillor McManus, and I don't know, if you're saying it is, it must be, I suspect, we maybe can get some wee bit of detail in that, Elaine, and get that distributed to the members. There is Councillor McNeill. Councillor McNeill. I know Councillor McNeill has got connection problems, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to say non-domestic rate responsibility of the Scottish Government, not North Lanarkshire Council. So how could the Council vary them?
Sorry, Ian, Elaine, yeah.
I haven't suggested that we can vary them, Councillor McNeill. Our responsibility is to collect them, and we have a statutory responsibility to do that. The statutory position for recovery of non-domestic rates means that we can't recover income until the end of September. We held off slightly on that this year, as did many other councils, because of the difficulties facing local businesses. But by the process that I described, we're about to issue soft reminders, and then we'll get on with the business of collecting the NDR from our businesses. But I agree, we don't have the opportunity to vary these.
Okay.
Chair, I was actually responding to Councillor McManus rather than Elaine there. Sorry about that.
No, if that is the case, then the response that we get back in relation to the question, that will be included within there, Elaine. Thank you very much. I've got one last question from Councillor Morgan. Councillor Morgan.
Sorry, Convener. Can I take the aspect that comes first in the report, and that is the council tax figures? Not as dramatic as probably we anticipated, but quite clearly this will change over the rest of this financial year and at the start of the next financial year. Bearing in mind that we have, as it pointed out in the paragraph, normal recovery processes have recommenced. That means that if you're in that situation, you're sitting in debt, you're getting letters in from various agencies, and in this one, the council related to council tax. Are we aware that being aware that there will be a bottleneck here, because this can, understandably and humanely so, has been kicked down the road. But as we know, when you do that particular strategy, you run out of road. So there's going to be a bottleneck now reached where a lot of people will be getting this type nature of this correspondence in. I'm talking specifically here about council tax. Potentially court cases mentioned, so on and so forth. We won't get into that debate. The reality is, as someone once said, the truth is the truth is the truth. The reality is that we have to deal with this as the legislation dictates. Are we beefing up in those areas where people who panic, who got under stress and strain, many of them could be ill as it is at the best of times? Are we beefing up the support staff there for when that bottleneck is released and there is going to be a flood of cases potentially reaching the legal stage of litigation against individuals? We can't stop it. It's the legal situation. But what are we doing in anticipation of that reality hitting us at a very soon period, which will be within months rather than years? Are the departments on board for that? Have they been beefed up? And they'll be quite comfortable that no one will be pushed into further panic measures than the present situation they unfortunately find themselves in.
Elaine?
I think, Councillor Morgan, we're doing absolutely everything we can to avoid getting to that situation. We do everything we possibly can, whether it's for individuals or for businesses, to support our communities. And I think there's been quite a lot of proactive work done, partly by corporate comms and partly through my own team, in terms of signposting and making sure that those, I said earlier that the soft reminders were very much focused on getting in touch, first of all, and there's been a lot of good work done through the council website and through us signposting to the financial inclusion team, just to make sure that everyone is receiving what they're absolutely entitled to and providing support as necessary or as available. I don't know that we can do too much when it gets to the legal position that you've described, but what I can say we are doing is everything in our powers to avoid getting to that stage.
Thank you, Elaine. Just to say to you, Councillor Morgan, that clearly when the financial inclusion team are involved to help with residents and tenants and whatever, it's amazing the amount of additional money they can get for additional benefits that they didn't know about, and that can make a difference. Now, we know, without opening all this up, we know that that will not happen to everybody, but we will do, and we will look at whatever way we can help. But like all the other councils, you're right, the bottleneck will start to happen, Councillor Morgan, there's no doubt about that, and we need to be aware to see where we can help. Right, right, thank you. Councillor Cullen, well, have you read? Listen, okay, I get, Councillor Cullen, what you're saying, but people have a right to put on their video without being anything obscene or whatever. Thank you for that. Councillor David Baird.
Just to give a bit of clarification on the point that Councillor McManus raised, I take it, I mean, he was on about changes and additional help for non-domestic rates, and I was a bit with the answer they got. It's a case that, and I think this is what maybe Councillor McManus was getting at, that the additional reliefs that the Scottish Government available for non-domestic properties has been applied from April to March next year. I think that was basically the equivalent of the increase in the poundage that had been applied, put on it at the start before the coronavirus took off. And you know, other hospitality businesses within Lanarkshire that have had to either close or that, are they getting the 100% relief?
What I'll do, Councillor Baird, what I'll do is that after this meeting, I'll get Elaine to contact Councillor McManus for clarity on the question, and that way then we can get the proper response out to the members. That's the way we'll deal with it, Councillor Baird, okay? Right, there is no other, thank you, Councillor Baird, there is no other questions on the chat bar for agenda item 7. Can you agree the recommendations that are on page 73? Agreed? Yep, okay. Agenda item 8 is the revenue budget monitoring report for the chief execs on page 79 to 90. Thank you, Elaine.
Okay, how's my audio? Can you hear me better?
It's better, but there's a difference there. But on you go. It's okay now.
Right, thank you. The first comment I'll make is that budget monitoring reports to all committees are more complex than they've been in previous years, obviously because of the impact of COVID, which has been managed on top of what was already a challenging budget approved in February for 2021. The Chief Executive Service is currently projecting an overspend of 661,000 for the financial year, and this includes net additional costs as a result of COVID of 906,000. So this position shows an increased overspend of 147,000 from the position that I reported at last committee. There's been additional costs of COVID identified of 322,000 as shown in Appendix 6. But to offset this, the service has incorporated additional management action, resulting in additional savings of 407,000. The budget incorporates 2.2 million of savings previously approved by Council. It's currently anticipated that 1.2 of that, or 56%, will be delivered in the financial year. Those that won't be achieved are in relation to digital programme, where there's a shortfall in savings expected of over 900,000, and that's the same position that was reported to the last committee.
Oh, thank you, Elaine, for that. Agenda item 8A, Councillor Linden.
Thanks, Chair. Very briefly, Elaine, could you provide us with more detail in relation to section 2.2.4 of the report in relation to the reduced service recharges of 0.353 resulting from curtailment overpayments of 0.400? What's meant by that, if you don't mind?
I've got my colleague Kathleen Shearer on the call without dropping her in it and throwing her under a bus. I wonder if she could give us a bit more clarity, because at this stage I'm afraid I can't.
Thanks, Elaine.
That's on section 2.2.4, I think, Jordan. Yep.
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 Kathleen, now's a good time to have internet problems.
Kathleen.
I've lost connection, thanks, Jordan. I think it's highlighting here that the majority of the loss of income is in relation to the licensing registrars and strategic comms income. Is that your question?
No, it's just slightly after that, Kathleen. The reduced service recharges of 0.353 resulting from curtailed payments of 0.400. Just a bit of background on that.
I think that's in relation to discretionary housing payments, but I'll certainly look into the specifics of that and come back to you if that's okay.
Yes, that's what we will do. That's what we will do. Agenda item 8.8. There is no other questions in the chat bar. Can we agree the recommendations? Yes. Yep. Okay. Agenda item 8B, pages 91 to 104. This is a similar report, but only for the full council. Elaine?
Yep, so the council is currently projecting a deficit of 11.859 million, which is a positive movement of almost 6.5 million since the last report, which was at period 4. And that's mainly due to additional funding for costs of COVID that was reported to the full council meeting at the 13th of August. The position for individual services is detailed in the report, but in summary, education and families are reporting a projected overspend of 6.7 million, which includes costs of COVID of 9.9 million. Enterprise and communities an overspend of 7 million, with net costs of COVID of 9.7 million, and Chief Exec's position is a deficit of 661,000, as I've detailed in my previous report. A deficit of 14.7 million is currently projected as a result of unbudgeted costs in relation to CLNL, and that includes supplier relief payments of 12.9 million, which reflects lost income experienced as a result of closures, and offset by funding received by the company from the coronavirus job retention scheme. And there is further funding being provided of 1.8 million in relation to unachievable savings in year. This position is under review and will be updated in light of the fact that the job retention scheme, as I've previously mentioned, has now been extended. The overall net outturn position of 11.8 million includes net additional costs as a result of COVID of 46 million, which is partially offset by grant income from Scottish Government of 22.8, leaving a net cost of COVID of 23.2 million, which the Council is currently looking to manage. Additional Scottish Government funding flexibilities were recently announced, and these are aimed at helping support councils through forecast deficits. However, we're still waiting for detail from Scottish Government on how these can be implemented, and we won't know that position until statutory guidance is provided. However, we do believe at this stage that the flexibilities on offer should allow us to manage the in-year deficit, which means that the solutions which were previously identified during the mid-year review of the budget have not been implemented at this time. The 2021 budget incorporates 31.2 million of savings. It's projected that 27.3 of this, or 87%, will be delivered within the financial year, and that was described in my report earlier. Finally, the report gives an update on the position for HRA and adult social care, although both of these are reported in detail to their relevant committees. The housing revenue account is projecting a surplus of 7.8 million, mainly because of reduced property costs as a result of the suspension of non-essential works during lockdown. Adult social care provision to the IGIB is projecting an overspend of 5.8 million at this time for a number of reasons, including increased costs of payments to external providers, increased employee costs and overspends on PPE, but this has been partially offset by funding received from Scottish Government.
Thanks, Elaine. Councillor London.
Thanks very much, Convener. Very briefly, if you don't mind, two questions, Elaine. At section 2.3.4 of the report around the financial flexibilities afforded by Scottish Government to the Council, I note that it says it's too early to estimate the likely financial impact on the Council from those measures. I just wondered what further dialogue was taking place on that to establish when we can expect temporary regulation or statutory guidance to become available, and if the service were already modelling to, I guess, be provided with some level of comfort or reassurance that the measures afforded will be sufficient in mitigating the outstanding figure, or at least significantly mitigating the outstanding figure. And then secondly, in relation to section 2.4.1 of the report, it outlines that an in-year savings gap of £3.957 million is still present, but replacement savings of 2.958 have been identified. I wonder where members can be cited on the detail of the alternative replacement savings of almost £3 million, where we can see what the detail of that looks like. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, Elaine, you've got two questions here.
Okay, firstly, in relation to the fiscal flexibilities, yes, the team are modelling the expected impact of these, and as are all local authorities, and there's a number of Director of Finance subgroups looking at these collectively. But what we're doing at this stage is modelling them based on what we believe the flexibilities will be. As I said earlier, it will be dependent on guidance, changes to statutory guidance, and also any caveats that Scottish Government want to apply in terms of how the flexibilities can be applied. Having said that, based on what we currently know, we believe that they will be sufficient to manage the extent of the deficit. And as a result, I have recommended that no further action is taken by the Council until we know more about these flexibilities. But the second part of that question, in terms of how quickly we can expect to get clarity from Scottish Government, I don't know. But COSLA are working very closely with them and working very hard to get clarity for us as soon as possible. Your other question, Councillor Linden, in relation to replacement savings, that's highlighted in the report, probably under the category of further management action. Largely, we've pulled back any unachieved savings by managing curtailment of non-essential expenditure and a recruitment freeze that you'll be aware has been employed across the Council. So that's largely how we would manage any budget gap that arises.
Okay, Convener, thanks so much. Can I just ask a brief supplementary through you, Chair, if you don't mind?
On you go, Jordan.
Thanks. Just in relation to that point on 2.3.4, Elaine, thanks for the answer. In terms of the modelling work being undertaken by your team, which has given you, I guess, sufficient comfort that the funds, the financial flexibilities will realise the funds required to meet the gap. Is there the modelling projecting any potential for additional resource from that financial flexibility, which would go beyond simply mitigating and meeting the cost that's currently there, and rather generate additional revenue?
Scottish Government have been very clear when they announced the fiscal flexibilities that they are to manage the cost of COVID only. So they won't give us any additional free revenue resource, if that's your question.
I think, Councillor London, that's the important part of it. It's to be used and utilised for COVID-19 only, as I understand it. But I think the frustration, irrespective of what political party we're all in, frustration is that by now we should have had that information now. The flexibility came out a number of weeks ago, and we're still waiting for the detail of that. And it's rather frustrating, I need to say. Agenda item 8B, there is no other councillors in the chat bar. Can we agree, any questions anyway, not councillors, can we agree to the recommendations? Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 9, capital programme, Elaine.
I reported at the last committee that because of the significant economic and financial uncertainty because of COVID-19, the Capital Delivery Group undertook a review of the capital programme with a view to supporting only essential and legally committed capital programme expenditure for 2021, and on top of that to establish a contingency fund of 6 million to meet COVID-related challenges. Based on that revised budgeted programme, which is 206 million, expenditure is anticipated to be under budget by 35 million. An underspend of 13 million is expected on the general fund element of the programme. The majority of that is on SIF-related projects because decisions around the allocation of the funding were delayed until the impact of the pandemic became clearer and that a review of the availability of SIF funding could be carried out. This work has now been done and will be presented to the next meeting of Policy and Strategy Committee on the 3rd of December. Also within the General Fund programme, it should be noted that capital receipts are projected to be significantly less than target. The Hub Campus theme remains on target, as do the early learning expansion projects. Enterprise projects, which mainly relate to City Deal, again, are also on target for the current financial year. The Hra Capital Programme is reported in detail to Communities and Housing Committee. It is currently 22 million under budget projection, and that's mainly due to delays as a result of issues with Scottish Water and the impact of COVID-19 within the mainstream new build and council buyback programme.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you for that. On that capital programme, agenda item 9, there is no questions in the chat bar. Can we agree the recommendations on page 105, councillors? Yep, I'm getting a nod. Thank you. Elaine, you'll be glad to know this is your last report. You can get that coffee after that. That was a lot of work on that. Agenda item 10, the Treasury Management Monitoring Report. It's a quarterly report. Elaine, thank you.
You're probably all glad to know this is my last report. The net overall borrowing position to the 30th of September was 785 million, and that's down 78 million from the last committee. And that's mainly due to a reduction in short-term borrowing of 56 million and 18.8 million reduction in long-term borrowing from PWLB. There has been no long-term borrowing undertaken since the last report to committee. I reported at our last committee that we'd taken a decision to increase the level of funds that we hold on immediate access from 3 million to 20 million over the lockdown period, and we did this to make sure that the council's cash flow position could be protected, and then there were significant amounts of money going out the door immediately following the opening of the business support grant schemes. And increasing the cash that we had available made sure that there was sufficient balances to pay all our normal commitments, such as creditors and payroll over and above these business grants. Due to the ongoing uncertainty, we've maintained that level of cash held through the last quarter. The other main impact of the pandemic on Treasury management is that borrowing is projected to be lower than budget. And that's mainly because capital programmes haven't progressed as planned during the COVID restrictions. And I referred to that in my earlier report in terms of the Capital Delivery Group reviewing the programme for the same reason. So capital expenditure is expected to be lower than was envisaged at the start of the year. And that will result in a saving of around £1 million in loan charges in the current year.
Okay, Elaine, it's amazing that COVID-19 has a real wide impact within the community, not just about, unfortunately, illnesses and deaths. It really affects everything as you can see it. I don't see any questions in the chat bar for agenda item 10. So can we agree the recommendations on page 113, councillors? Yep, I'm getting the nod. Thank you. Agenda item, thank you for your input, Elaine, for those items. We're going to agenda item 11 on pages 123 to 140, and it's a performance indicating for North Lanarkshire properties. Ian Martin, Ian, are you available?
Yes, thank you, Convener. This is a 6-monthly report providing an update on North Lanarkshire Properties performance for the period 5th of January 2020 to the 24th of July 2020, along with the financial outturn position as at the 11th of March 2020 and the financial performance for the period 1st of April 2020 to the 24th of July 2020. Section 1 of the report provides background with details of the establishment of North Lanarkshire Properties, and paragraphs 1.2 to 1.7 outline the governance arrangements, along with details of the decision taken by the Management Committee at its meeting on the 3rd of September to approve a formal minute of variation to the service level agreement, include details of the Strategic Business Manager Support Services to be provided by the Head of Asset and Procurement Solutions, and the associated charges for that service. Section 2.2 of the report provides details of the performance indicators, which are detailed in Appendix 1 of the report and cover the period from the 5th of January 2020 to 24th of July. Paragraphs 2.3 to 2.6 provide details of NLP's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, where you'll see it's noted that NLP received a number of requests for rent support during the lockdown period, and where debt recovery action was suspended during that time, and details of the recovery action now being taken are detailed within that section of the report. It's also noted that Robert Steenson had been granted temporary authority to act on behalf of the NLP property investments and performance of the board's duties to represent the company and the LLP's management committee during the COVID-19 emergency period. And that temporary arrangement was brought to an end at the board's meeting on the 3rd of September. Paragraphs 2.6 to 2.8 provide details of the service highlights for the company, where it notes the creation of 14 modern starter units at Orbison Street in Motherwell, the refurbishment of Buchanan Street and Hall Craig Street building, and the work the company is undertaking in support of the council's town centre regeneration plans. Section 4.1 of the report provides details of the financial arrangements for the company, and in particular a great reference to paragraphs 4.110 to 4.113. You will note the financial position of the organisation is likely to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Taking into account the impact and the estimated to reduction in the rental invoiced, there's likely to be an impact in the financial performance of £487,000, which will impact on a transfer of reserves of £480,000 to cover this amount. Alterations to the covenant ratio for financial year 2020-21 are detailed in paragraphs 4.17 to 4.120, which in altering the covenant arrangement, this will allow for reserves to be used to cover the reported losses in the short term, and anticipate that NLP will return to profit in years 2020 to 2021. The appendices at 2, 3, 4 and 5 relate to the financial arrangements for North Lanarkshire Properties, and the recommendations are detailed at page 1, 2, 3 of the agenda pack.
Thank you, Ian. I've got one, Councillor Lennon. Councillor Lennon, I'll bring you in a minute. Clarification, Andrew, I've got a note there from 44771, a declaration. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, I've just had a private chat, and it's Councillor Lennon.
That's okay. Councillor Lennon?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I see it now. I thought Councillor Lennon was going to ask a question. Sorry, Andrew. Agenda item 11, there is no questions on the chat bar, Andrew. Just double check that for me. Are you okay with that?
I can't see any, convener.
Right, I'm the same. So can we agree agenda item 11, pages 1, 2, 3, because there's an approval in there on number 4 recommendation. Can we agree the recommendation? Yes, thank you very, very much. Agenda item 4, this is the start now of, there's the next 4 items are property transactions, and there's a detail in amongst every one of them. What we normally do with these when they're as clear as this, rather than go through the actual item, I would ask the members questions. Have you got any questions, members, on agenda item 12? It's to approve the sale of the site with that. Is there any questions from the members on that? You okay with that? Agenda item 12, you can agree the report on pages 141? Yes, thank you. Agenda item 13 is the same. It's a good news story. We're going to get 20 new council houses on the site, which is encouraging, very much so. Is there any questions from members to the report? No? Are you happy to agree the report on pages 145? Yep, thank you very much. The next one is agenda item 14. And again, councillors, if there's any questions, it's the Old Quarry site and Old Quarry Road in Cumbernauld. Approve the sale of an industrial site. There's any questions to that? Agenda item 14? No, I don't see any come in. That's on page 149. Can we agree the recommendations? Yep. Pages 153 to 158 has agenda item 15. This is the surplus determination of land at Lorne Avenue. Agenda item 15. There's a recommendation there coming through. Is there any questions to this particular item?
Convener, Councillor Cullen has just informed me that his group wishes to move an amendment to this item.
Moves an amendment. Okay. Yes. All right. Councillor Cullen. Andrew, have you got the amendment?
No, I don't, Convener.
You sorry?
I don't, Convener. It was just notified to me in the private chat bar.
All right. Okay. Right, Councillor Cullen.
Convener, it's quite a simple amendment. We would like to move that the recommendations at point 3 is changed from the current refuse to request to approve the request to declare the site surplus.
Okay.
The reason for the amendment is that there's been sort of deputations to all councillors involved in the committee, and there seems to be a bit of debate on what the community want. And we feel that declaring it surplus to requirement doesn't really influence the decision on what the potential outcome of the use of the piece of land is, but at least it moves it forward and allows the community and or planning to determine what the eventual use of that piece of land is deemed to be used for.
Okay. Councillor Cullen, do you have a seconder?
Seconder is Councillor Sandy Watson, who might not be online here.
Yeah, I can. I'm okay, David. I'm pretty pleased to second that.
Okay. Is there any questions from anyone? No. I'm not going straight to the vote with us. I need to maybe make a comment first. Councillor Cullen, have you anything else you want to say?
No, thanks, Convener. I think I've said what said my piece. It's just we're not siding with any community representation. There's seems to be two sides of the community. You've got the bowling club itself that really need this for their long-term sustainability, and then you've got a community group that's also got an interest in a piece of land. By declaring it surplus, it doesn't influence what side of the community gets the use of the piece of land. It merely moves the process forward and allows the proper determination to be made at the appropriate committee in relation to what that piece of land is used for and what community group basically gets use of the piece of land and the eventual outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Cullen. What I'll say, and I'm moving the motion put forward by the recommendation of the officers, and I would guide yourselves, all the councillors, to section 2.5 and 2.6. And clearly there's a concern being raised from the local members and from some departments. And I think the other thing it's important, if you look at section 4.1, the maintenance cost for this is £112 per year in total, as I understand it on the paper. So I would ask you to look and consider that position that the officers have thoroughly checked, and that's why they've got those recommendations there. Andrew, we're moving. You want to?
I'll second the motion, convener.
Sorry, you're absolutely right. Thanks for that, Ian. Andrew, do you want to let the members know the clarity of the motion and the amendment?
Indeed, thank you, convener. So there's a motion moved by the convener, which is to refuse the request to declare the land surplus, and there's been an amendment moved by Councillor Cullen that the request be approved. So I'm just going to move straight to the vote. Apologies, a number of members have been coming on and off during the meeting, so if I'll call everyone's name who should be here, but obviously some might not be here. Councillor Dinesh Ashraf. I don't believe he's on the call. Councillor Junaid Ashraf. I believe he's on the call.
Sorry, Andrew. Sorry, convener. Also, this has just been put onto us, and obviously, as a group, we haven't really had a chance to discuss any of this. So, obviously, I'm unsure of which way I'm supposed to be voting because I'm unsure of the issue itself. So, I'm still reading through some of the sections of the paper, things like that. I think there's a point of order from Councillor Goldie right now as well.
Councillor Goldie, do you have a point of order?
Thanks, convener. It was just really for clarification. He said he was going to check how many members were actually on the call. Is this what we're doing just now, or are we proceeding to the vote on this? It's just a little bit unclear on it whether this is actually the vote or whether at this specific point what we are trying to do is trying to establish the amount of members.
No.
Thanks.
Andrew, clarify that, please.
Yeah, I was just moving to the vote, but I was just making the point that there might be some pauses because some members might not be on the call, and I call a name, and we just need to give them time to identify themselves. So,
Andrew, for the sake of responsibility, councillors should be at the committee meeting. If there's a problem with any connection problems, I get that. We're moving to the vote, Andrew, and we're going through the vote. For clarity, councillors, that's the way we're going. We're moving to the vote. Andrew?
Okay. Councillor Junaid Ashraf?
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Baird? Councillor Baird?
Abstain.
Sorry, was that abstain?
Yes.
Thank you.
Abstain.
Abstain, thank you. Councillor Beveridge? Councillor Beveridge? I can see you're on the call, Councillor Beveridge. Councillor Burgess?
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Burrows?
Motion.
Councillor Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Carragher, who I should notify is substituting today for Councillor McGregor.
Yeah, thank you. Abstain.
Okay. Councillor Castles?
Motion.
Councillor Michael Coyle? I think Councillor Coyle might have left the call. Councillor Cullen?
Amendment.
Councillor Curran?
Motion.
Councillor Curry? Councillor Curry? No. Councillor Doherty?
Motion.
Councillor Farouk? Councillor Farouk?
Andrew.
No. Councillor Fisher? I don't believe he's on the call. Councillor Doherty?
Abstain.
Andrew, I'm sorry to intervene. There is somebody has left. They're unmuted. Please, everybody mute your system, please. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. So, Councillor Goldie, sorry, I think you said abstain, didn't you? Councillor Goldie.
What?
Was that a motion, Councillor Goldie? Yeah, see you nodding. Councillor Graham's not here. Councillor Hume.
Abstain.
Councillor Catherine Johnson.
Cathy, it's you now. She's coming.
Sorry, folks. Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tom Johnson.
Abstain.
Councillor Jones.
Motion.
Councillor Larson.
Abstain.
Councillor Lennon. Councillor Lennon. No. Councillor Linden.
Can I call Andrew? I think he's having a microphone problem, perhaps, if he indicates in the chat. Notwithstanding that, I'm an abstention. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Councillor Lennon has just indicated in the chat bar he's voting for the amendment. So if you're accepting, I'll put that in. Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor McManus. Councillor McManus.
Abstain.
No. Abstain, thank you. Councillor McNeill.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor Morgan.
Motion.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Redding.
Motion.
Councillor Shevlin.
Motion.
Councillor Shields is an apology. Councillor Stubbs is absent. Councillor Annette Valentine.
Abstain.
Thank you. And Councillor Watson. Councillor Watson. I think Councillor Watson's just dropped off the call. For the amendment, there were 2 votes. For the motion, there were 14 and there were 12 abstentions. So the motion is carried, Nina.
Andrew, I think the convener may not be unmuted.
Well done, because I'm trying to keep off the system to let everybody in. Yep, you're absolutely right. Thanks for that, Councillor Linden. We're moving to agenda item 16, pages 159 to 166. The report is here in front of you. Chris Sullivan will take any questions to you. Agenda item 16. Andrew, you've not got it up yet. I know you're busy trying to do that. I don't see any questions in there. None. Andrew, do you see any questions? No. Agenda item 16? No, there's none.
No, apologies about that. I was just making sure I didn't lose all my votes from the roll call vote.
No, I can. So agenda item 16, the recommended pages is 159. Can we agree the recommendations? Yes, thank you. The same item is on the contracts awarded below approval. Agenda item 17. It's a straightforward report. It's here for you. Agenda item 17. I don't see any questions in the chat bar, councillors. Can you agree the recommendations on page 167? Yes. Agenda item 18 and 19. I need to say these are private business and we need to move to public exemption. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that?
I'll move it. Councillor Jones here.
Okay, can I get a seconder?
I'll second it.
Okay, Councillor Log, thank you very much. Andrew, have you